I never thought I'd become the star of my own neighborhood drama, but here we are. It all started with a notification on my phone. The chime that usually meant my groceries had arrived instead became the beginning of the strangest confrontation I've had since moving into Oakwood Estates 3 months ago. The video footage was crystal clear. A woman in oversized sunglasses and a visor crept onto my front porch at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. She glanced around nervously, snatched my 2 bags of groceries, and scurried away like she was taking her rightful property. The best part? She had absolutely no idea that my doorbell camera was recording her every move, from her furtive glances to her hasty retreat across my lawn. I couldn't believe my eyes when I played back the footage. That wasn't just any neighbor. That was Deborah Wilson, our HOA president, who everyone called Karen behind her back. The same woman who had lectured me about my garbage cans being visible from the street was now stealing my food. I watched the footage 3 more times, feeling a mixture of shock and vindication. For weeks, I'd noticed items missing from my deliveries. A bag of apples here, a carton of eggs there. I'd always assumed the delivery service had made a mistake or forgotten items. It never occurred to me that someone in my supposedly upscale neighborhood was stealing from my porch. Especially not the person who sent out weekly emails about community standards and property values. I'm a software developer who works remotely, and my schedule is packed with video calls and coding sessions that often run late into the evening. Weekly grocery deliveries are essential for me. Not a luxury but a necessity. Without them, I'd be living on whatever I could scrounge from the vending machines at the gym down the street. So having my food disappear wasn't just an inconvenience, it was disrupting my entire weekly routine. That afternoon, I'd received the notification that my groceries had been delivered at 2:05. I was in the middle of a crucial meeting and couldn't step away immediately. By the time I wrapped up 10 minutes later and went to retrieve my delivery, the porch was empty. Not even a receipt was left behind. That's when I checked the camera footage and discovered the truth. The brazenness of it all was what got to me. Deborah, had been the first person to welcome me to the neighborhood, handing me a thick binder of HOA regulations along with a thinly veiled warning about maintaining neighborhood standards. She'd stopped by my house twice to inform me that my lawn was a 1/4 inch too high and that my mailbox needed to be repainted the exact shade of Oakwood cream specified in the bylaws. And now here she was, stealing my groceries in broad daylight. I hesitated before deciding what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her directly, but another part knew that evidence was power. So I did something that surprised even myself. I forwarded the video to the local police department's non-emergency email along with a brief explanation. Then, because I believed in proper channels, I also sent it to the other HOA board members with a polite note expressing my concern about unusual activity on my property. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would escalate. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with texts from neighbors. Apparently, I wasn't the only one missing deliveries. The Johnsons down the street had lost a package of steaks last week. The elderly couple on the corner mentioned their medication delivery had vanished twice. It seemed Karen had been busy, and everyone had been too embarrassed or too intimidated by her position to speak up. By evening, a police cruiser pulled up outside Karen's 2-story colonial with the perfectly manicured lawn. I wasn't trying to spy, but my home office window had a clear view of her driveway. Through the blinds, I watched as 2 officers approached her front door. When she answered, she was still holding what looked suspiciously like the carton of oat milk that had been on my grocery list. Even from a distance, I could see her expression shift from confusion to indignation as the officers spoke to her. The next day brought the confrontation I'd been dreading. Karen marched up to my door at 7:30 in the morning, her face flushed with anger. I was barely on my first cup of coffee when the doorbell rang, and there she stood, arms crossed and foot tapping impatiently. "I know what you did," she said with a voice dripping with disdain. "You sent that ridiculous video to the police and the board. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" I maintained my composure, even as she continued her tirade. "Good morning, Deborah. Would you like to come in and discuss this like adults?" Her eyes narrowed as she stepped into my living room without waiting for a proper invitation. "There's nothing to discuss. That video is clearly edited. Anyone with half a brain can see that. I would never steal anything, especially not groceries. I drive a Mercedes, For goodness sake. I offered her a seat which she refused, preferring to stand and look down at me as she spoke. I don't appreciate being falsely accused. I'm the president of this HOA, and I have a reputation to maintain. I'll have you know that I'm considering legal action against you for defamation. It was at that moment that my doorbell camera sent another alert to my phone. I glanced down to see the grocery delivery person dropping off my replacement order, the one I'd placed after reporting the theft. Karen followed my gaze and must have realized what was happening because she abruptly turned and headed for my front door. "I'll be right back," she said with forced casualness. "I just remembered I left something in my car." I didn't need the doorbell camera to know what she was planning. I simply followed her to the door and stepped outside just as she was bending down to pick up my grocery bags. The delivery person was still walking back to their vehicle when they turned and saw us both standing there. "Is there a problem with the delivery?" they asked, looking confused. Karen straightened up immediately, adjusting her visor. "I was just helping my neighbor bring in his groceries." "He has a bad back, don't you, dear?" she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My back is fine," I replied calmly. "And these are my groceries, Deborah. Just like the ones you took yesterday, and probably the week before that as well." The delivery person, sensing the tension, quickly got into their car and drove away. Karen's face went through a fascinating array of expressions, from fake concern to anger to something approaching panic. But she recovered quickly. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill," she said, attempting to regain control of the situation. "It was an honest mistake. Sometimes deliveries get mixed up. I thought those groceries yesterday were mine." I nodded thoughtfully. "An easy mistake to make, I suppose. Except that my name and address were on the receipt. And you didn't order any groceries yesterday, did you?" Her face flushed again. "This is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. I have an HOA meeting to prepare for." As she turned to leave, we both noticed the police cruiser pulling up to the curb. The same two officers from the previous evening stepped out, and Karen's posture stiffened visibly. "Mrs. Wilson," one of the officers said as they approached, "we have a few more questions for you about the incident we discussed yesterday." What followed was both uncomfortable and oddly satisfying. The officers explained that after reviewing my footage and speaking with other neighbors, they had enough evidence to suggest a pattern of theft. They asked if they could look in her kitchen, and though Karen initially refused, something about their tone must have convinced her that cooperation was her best option. I didn't go with them, but later heard from my next-door neighbor that when the officers entered Karen's house, they found no fewer than 3 separate grocery deliveries, including items with shipping labels and receipts clearly addressed to other houses in the neighborhood. My missing organic apples and premium coffee beans were sitting right on her counter. Karen's defense crumbled further when the officers revealed that another neighbor had provided security footage showing her taking packages from their porch on 2 separate occasions. Her story shifted from outright denial to claims of confusion, then to a bizarre explanation that she was collecting misdelivered items to return them properly, a service apparently no one had asked for or been informed about. The turning point came when the officers asked about a specific package of prescription medication that had gone missing from the elderly couple's porch. Karen's face apparently went pale when they mentioned it was a controlled substance, and the penalties for stealing such medications were significantly more severe than those for ordinary theft. "I didn't know what was in those packages," she reportedly said, her voice losing its usual authoritative edge. "I was just trying to keep the neighborhood tidy." That afternoon, the entire Oakwood Estates neighborhood watched in collective shock as Karen was escorted to the police car. She wasn't handcuffed, but her posture was defeated, her designer outfit and perfectly styled hair at odds with the gravity of the situation. As the officers helped her into the back seat, she caught sight of several neighbors watching from their driveways and windows. "This is all a misunderstanding," she called out, her voice carrying across the manicured lawns. "I pay more in HOA dues than most of you combined. I've maintained property values in this neighborhood for 8 years. No one responded. The silence was perhaps more damning than any criticism could have been. The legal consequences came swiftly. Karen was charged with multiple counts of petty theft, with the stolen prescription medication elevating one charge to a more serious offense. At her hearing, she was ordered to pay restitution to everyone she had stolen from, totaling over $2,000, plus court fees. She received 6 months of probation and was required to complete 100 hours of community service. The HOA board called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove her as president. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that the same strict bylaws Karen had wielded like a weapon against her neighbors now provided the mechanism for her removal due to conduct unbecoming a board member. When the verdict was announced in court, Karen's perfectly maintained facade finally cracked completely. "This will ruin me," she said, tears streaking her makeup as she looked around the courtroom at the neighbors she had terrorized for years. "My real estate clients will find out. My reputation is everything in this business." The judge was unmoved. "Perhaps you should have considered that before helping yourself to other people's property, Mrs. Wilson." As Karen was led away by her attorney, she locked eyes with me for a brief moment. The woman who had once looked down on me for letting my grass grow a quarter-inch too tall now appeared small and diminished, her power and influence evaporating in the face of actual consequences. For the first time since I'd moved into Oakwood Estates, I felt like I truly belonged to the neighborhood. Not because I followed every arbitrary rule, but because I'd stood up for what was right.